Well, we all know that during those who say, I don't, but in the Siddur, there's a whole tefillah before the Sphira, after the Sphira, and also dealing with different midos, tovos, for example, just an example. Today, still, and for you definitely, it's the 21st day of the Omer, which is the midah of Malchus B'Tiferes, which means actually, it means to say to what extent you have nobility in your compassion. We're dealing with the personality of a person to what extent he has compassion. How do you channel it? I'll explain maybe a little later what these things mean, but let's just give it a broad understanding before we go further. And that is this period of the year is as opposed to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, which is the question of what kind of decisions do you make? What kind of actions, thoughts, speech do you express yourself in? Here we're dealing for 49 days with what your psychological profile. How do you not what you're doing, but why you're doing it? What has to be fixed, rectified, retweaked, shall we say, with not what you're doing but who you are. And that's what you call the midos. The midos, we know that you say by Baruch David in the morning, and it says over there that God is attributed basically with 7. We're describing his interactive profile. Your extensiveness, Gevura, your constrictiveness, Hatiferes, the harmony between the aforementioned, Hanetzach, your overwhelmingness, and the fact that you retract yourself, allowing other people to exist. I'll explain that carefully later, and so on and so forth. That is the source of what they call the 7 midos elyonos. That's Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. I will explain them shortly. So what we have is God. We know that the Rambam himself, when he describes in Hilchos Deos the mitzvah of Alachta B'drachav, to go in the ways of God, it is not a mitzvah of doing things, but rather a mitzvah of becoming a certain type of a person. The language of the Rambam is Mahu Nikra Rachum, Afata Heye Rachum. Just as he is described in the scriptures as being compassionate or merciful, also you should become and be a person which is compassionate and merciful. We're talking about building a personality, not doing actions. I must tell you a story. I think we had this once. Rav Hutner taught this to me. He showed this Rambam to me. He said the mitzvah is not to visit the sick. The mitzvah is to be a person which would naturally visit the sick. Bikkur Chaylim is only there as much as it expresses what you really are. It is like the mitzvah, all the mitzvahs of the midos tapas v'alachta b'drachav ma'u nikra chanun afatei yerachun ma'u nikra chanun afatei chanun ma'u nikra kadosh afatei heyei kadosh. Just as he is received in the mikra as being transcended, you should become a transcendent type of person. He was not interested in the crass and the earthy and the mundane. You should be a person which naturally transcends above beyond this. In other words, the sick person is not your esrog that you're shaking. He's not your chefza of the mitzvah. What's the chefza of the mitzvah of Balachta B'drachav? And the answer is you are. You are the thing which has to be transformed. You are a person which becomes different and better. And that's the mitzvah of Balachta B'drachav. You say, there are 2 psukim. One is Balachta B'drachav, which is a mitzvah of the lechet of Darkei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the other is a mitzvah of Hevedomer Lo. Ani v'hu, zekeli v'anvehu. Anvehu means ani v'hu, me and him. So Chazal say Hevedomer Lo. You should emulate God. Now that's already a question not of his action, but rather in him. Ani v'hu. And the Rambam explains that those are not 2 dinim, but one explains the other. Balachta B'drachav could sound like a mechanical mitzvah. Do whatever he does. Aniva, who implies be like who he is. The Rambam, when he explains Balachta B'drachav in the 2nd chapter of the 1st chapter, of Hilchot Deot, discusses the idea of what does Balachta B'drachav mean. Become that type of a person. It's a very important thing to understand when you do when you can do Tzedakah, just midin tzedakah, because it's a mechanical mitzvah, and that's a mitzvah in the Torah. But you can also give tzedakah as an act of compassion and mercy, and that would be a key mitzvah of alachta b'drachav. It's just like the mitzvah of the Haftarah Re'acha Kamocha. It's not a mechanical mitzvah, it must become an emotion. What is the minimum emotion? You should be happy with the success of your fellow Jew. You should not be sad with the success of the fellow Jew. That's how the Ramban explains it, the minimum. We're not asking you to love him as you love yourself, but at least in Yiddish is a great word, farginen. It means you should be happy. You shouldn't be sad that someone's doing well. You should be happy that someone's doing well. That's the minimum mitzvah. So that's also an emotional reality, who you are and what you are. So this reflects itself mostly in Ben Adam L'Chaverai. You got to be very blunt about this. Mostly in Ben Adam L'Chaverai, in these ideas of the midos. They can express themselves also in the mitzvahs of Ben Adam L'Malka, but I would say the Iker Milsa is that when we discuss the idea, so we know that in Sfira Soima, these are the 7 categories, we'll describe them later exactly what they are, of the interactive profile. And as we look carefully in the Sfira Soima list, every day of Sfira is a day of contemplation about a certain aspect of that personality. As I mentioned before, that today is the Midah of, it's the last day of Tiferes, and Malchus Tiferes, which means to say each Midah of the 7 has within it 7 subcategories. You know, just like there's the wheat of Chesed, there's Chesed Sheba Chesed, Gvura Sheba Chesed, Netzach Sheba Chesed, and so on and so forth. So these are really Yemei Adin, not Yemei Adin, rather Yemei Tshuva. The Reb Chaim Vital in his Hagdama to Sefer Eitz Chaim writes this. He writes that the idea of the Midos is because Derech Eretz Kodma L'Torah, fear darf man sein a Mensch. First you have to be a person, and then afterwards you can start becoming a religious person. So he says, first and foremost, before Matan Torah, one has to work on his midos topa. So this is a time of introspection. This is a time of introspection of not what I'm doing, but why I am doing it. What in me makes me do certain things, and those interactive aspects of myself. How can I fix them? How can I not? I'll give you an example. If this today is the din of Malchus Shabbat Tiferes equals the idea of having a compassion, but in a noble way, the idea is not just giving charity and helping the needy to help themselves in a fashion that strengthens their dignity. This would be a day of not just giving, but, making them feel good about themselves, dignify people. And that's a very big thing, to dignify people. That would be a perfect example of the avoid to focus on today, that when I do things, I should give people a sense of self, a sense of dignity. As I remember Richard Joel, the president of IU, said in his inaugural speech, enable and ennoble, if I recall. He's right. That's Malchus Shabbat Tiferes, the idea of giving nobility in your compassion. That's a very important thing to do. This would be the Avodah Hayom, a day to think about and to focus on. I don't know why that this is not worked upon. These are 49 very important days, as the Reb Chaim Vital writes. This is the days of Derech Eretz Shekodma L'Torah. Before is Vav Sivan, when there's Matan Torah, first we have to focus on Derech Eretz. This is something which I wish would be taught much more, and I think it's important to focus on it. That's what I'm going to spend today, and maybe the next time also, explaining how this is found. This is clearly laid out in the Siddur in front of us. In the Siddur, we have this all over. First, I was excited to explain all this. I first want to basically explain what those midos are. So you have your Siddur, it's V'cho Hashem HaGedula, V'Advur, V'Tiferes, V'Netzach, V'Hoid, those are the aspects. They are called. This is found basically. It's found in Zohar Kodesh already. It's called Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. Let me explain what they are. Chesed. The Rambam writes in Moreh Nevuchim in the last chapter. Literally, what does Chesed mean? People think Chesed means being nice and doing things. Totally not. He said chesed means extensiveness. It means limitless activity. Most of the times it's written in a positive sense, but it also means incest is also called chesed. The Gemara says on the pasuk, "Olam chesed yibanei." So all the rabbis say the speech is the world was created through tzedakah, chesed. No, Chazal say it means the world was created through incest, because who would Cain marry but his sister? So that's also called chesed. Chesed does not just have to mean, doesn't mean doing good things. It means doing things without limitations. Doing good without limitation is called chesed. Doing good, but because of a certain obligation, is not called chesed. That's called tzedakah. Rambam explained that tzedakah means tzedek. You're doing the right thing. But as you have a certain moral compass which demands to do the right thing. So you're actually fulfilling an obligation, whether it's a psychological obligation, a communal obligation. This is tzedakah. Chesed means it's limitless. You're giving it without a cheshbon. You know what it's like? It's like I'll never forget this. I remember Shlomo Carlebach was a person of total chesed. He would. So I know the times at the end of his life he was quite poor. My brother invited him to Crown Heights to make a concert because he couldn't pay his bills. He got all his money, would just give away to poor people. He just gave everything away. He died a poor person. This is a man which was a rock star for who knows how many years. He died a poor person. There was a collection for his in his funeral. You should know. I was in America at the time, but it's unbelievable. This is a man which a poor man would meet him after a concert and say, "Listen, I really have a hard time." He would take take whatever he had in his pocket. For as I know, X amount of money that he made for his concert and give it away. He wouldn't even look. That's called chesed. On a cheshbon. It's called expressing oneself without a cheshbon. It can be negative too. People, as I said before, you have a connection with something which is off limits. Incest, for example, is also called chesed. Chesedu. This is called chesed. So chesed means the idea that God expresses himself in creative forms without cheshbon at all, which is what Olam Chesed Yibanei means also. What does chesed mean? God extended himself into existence. The infinite expressed itself in a finite form called creator, and there was no reason for it because the idea of reason is something which is created by God. Reason, logic is a finite form. Infinity did it not because it felt it was right or wrong. It just did it. That's what it means. As I once taught you, the Medrash Tanchuma and Pasha Shmini, when it describes the will of creation, it says, "Nis'avaloi la'kadosh baruch hu liyot lo dira b'tachtonim." God had a taiva to have a dira, a residence in lower levels of consciousness. I heard this from Lubavitcher Rebbe himself, Zichron Livracha. Why is it called about taiva? Because taiva means a ratzain which is not governed by das. Well, for goodness sakes, das alone is a finite form. What made the infinite God want to create a finite expression of himself? The answer, well, it couldn't be a reason, because reason is a finite form. So obviously that which created this all in finite form is beyond finite. Therefore, it has no reason, no logic. Logic is a proportional relationship between a cause and an effect, and therefore, logically speaking, you cannot say that there's a logical reason for creation. A very important thing in theology, people should know this. I'm always asked, can God do X? Logically, no. But who says creation is not logical, so God can do anything he wants? And these questions make no sense because you're only in the realm of logic, and this is beyond logic. So this is the idea of God expressing himself. So this is going back to this. So God created this interactive persona, and one is chesed, ona cheshbon. What is gvura mean? So we know the person that embodied this aspect of Avodah Hashem was Avraham Avinu, which actually went around without question. Everything he saw is godly, and therefore let's be makar of everybody and anything on cheshbon. He didn't have a yeshiva l'mitzuyanim. I know I go to Jerusalem, all these shingles say, Yeshiva Mitsuyanim. I don't know who's not a Mitsuyan, obviously, in Jerusalem. I don't know. Yeshiva Mitsuyanim. I know God wasn't, Avraham Avinu didn't have a Yeshiva Mitsuyanim. It was open, anybody, man, I got to show you Yiddishkeit. That was Avraham Avinu. Yitzchak Avinu was different. We saw his personality. He's a very constricted personality. He's not expressed in the Chumash as a jitterbug like his father, running around and doing rather much more reserved, blind, less attached to the world around him. It's a bit of a space cadet, if conned by his wife, and so on and so forth. This is the midah of Gvura. Gvura means to say that God sets limitations, because if God would only give without cheshbon, there would be no din and dayan. There wouldn't be any accountability. There wouldn't be any restrictions. It would be Haight Ashbury in the late 60s, early 70s. I mean, yeah, all goes, you know what I mean? That's it. That's not the way God created the world, as form. The world is not just energy. Look, everything has a form to it. Form is the idea of limitation of the energy. Okay, there's a certain form. Gvura is the idea, Eze Gibor, Hakovesh et Yitzro. What is a Gibor? The one who sets limits to his natural instincts. And this is the idea of Gvura. So Yitzchak Avinu is the one which serves God, that aspect of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now, as you all know, that when you deal with a certain aspect of things and you're very extreme in them, there's going to be children which will take it slightly differently. For example, Avraham Avinu was into chesed, endless approach to the world, people, no cheshbon. Well, then he had one son, which is called Yishmael. He also has a midah of chesed. Very, very hospitable people, the Bedouins, etc. But that chesed can also go to the chesed of tumah, which is called znus. And the Chazal Taka say that why didn't they Yishmael accept the Torah? Because they couldn't take the issue of Leisinaf. They had the chesed of tumah. So you see, when you teach, when you go into an extreme, it's a very important thing in educating children and students. If you put it in a box, they can take that box in the wrong place. For example, Yitzchak Avinu, this idea of constriction, the world is not interesting to me. So it can be constriction of constricting yourself, or you can do like Esau, which is the son. He decides to constrict the life of other people, equals kills people. So that's Gvura. The Kedusha is constricting oneself. Gvura, the Tumah, is constricting other people. There you have it. You have a Gibor, which is Kevish Yitzray, and have a Gibor, which snuffed off the life of other people. So what happens when you live in a life of an extreme, which is probably necessary in the beginning of a revolution? So naturally, people can't take your ideals, translating it into another channel. If the idea is constriction of life, well, then it could be constriction of my life or constriction of other people's life. And that's what happened there. Until he had the third son, which is called Yaakov. Now he has the midah, which is called Tiferes, harmony, beauty. In other words, he has also compassion. The idea is he cares, but there's a limit, not limitless. Compassion is something according to what is needed. I have compassion. What does it do here? There are times that I will do chesed, there are times that I do gvura, and my chesed will combine with the gvura, and my gvura will have a chesed to it. Even if I have to constrict you, it'll be with some kind of a compassionate way of doing it. Even I'm going to give, but there's going to be a certain hinge, a limit to it. There's going to be some kind of a mixture. It's a beautiful mixture between the two. Therefore, since basically he did not have any specific midah, but what he had was to understand that one cannot go to extremes, and one has to be able to mix and merge depending on people and place. His mitosai shlema, his education actually worked. And he had no psolis, no kid going off to an extreme in any midah. It's a very important thing. Because what was taught is above the midos. There's a God there which basically mixes and merges, and it doesn't go to extremes. And that's the midah of Yaakov Avinu, midas hatiferes. This is this week, which is now ending, okay? This is midas hatiferes of Yaakov Avinu. Okay, that's the third thing. Then you have to once you have that, so you have, it's literally like a seesaw. You go to the right, you go to the left, and then somehow the pendulum comes towards the middle. Chesed is a very creative external. If you would look in the body of the man, the right hand would be the parallel to chesed, because the right hand is the tool through which, for most people, it's your creative expression, tool of expression. That's how you write. That's how, if you play basketball, you understand you may hold the ball one, but you push it out into the hoop with your right. If you box, you may protect with your left hand, but you're jabbing with your right, and so on and so forth. This is the tool of extensive expression. Your left hand is auxiliary. Your left hand is auxiliary. It's supportive for a right-handed person. Again, now, since we know, for example, when we want to talk about God giving the Torah, we say, mi, no, Eishtat Lamo. The greatest chesed possible, he gave with his right hand. Okay? The idea of the right hand is I'm giving you myself totally. If you were giving you with the left hand, it would be with a reservation. Okay? That's why the pasuk says, Lev Chacham, this is a Bala Akeda in Parshas Emor. When it says, Lev Chacham Liyamino, the heart of a wise person is to his right, is on his right side. Now, that is not describing a physiological phenomenon. My goodness sakes, the heart is not in the right, it's not in the left, it's in the center with a swerve at the bottom towards the left. That's what it is. You can't, what do you mean, Lev Chacham Liyamino? I become wise, my heart moves. It's a metaphor. Lev means to say your inclinations, that which excites you, as we discussed this in the past. Why do people in Valentine's Day carve and remember, so to speak, hearts on trees? Love is describing something which excites a person, so you need more oxygen to your brain cells, so your pump starts pumping more blood in order for you to have more oxygen in your brain cells. That's why we describe Lev. So Lev is a metaphor for that which excites you. Okay, what excites the Chacham? Yamino, the primary things of life. Yamin is the primary expression. He will look at the ikr of a sugya. He will look at the ikr. What is the real core of the issue? The fool, will not look at the core, but rather the externalities, the auxiliary. He'll go into, for example, the smolo. He will look at the auxiliary sides of existence. For example, one wants to focus on religion. So the yamin would be the core emuna, ava, vayira, etc. And the small would be just the externalities of religion. Okay, let's understand it that way. And so far and forth, a person can go and buy flowers for your wife. So you can give flowers, or you can give yourself through flowers. And there's a major nafkamina. If you're Lev Chacham, you're the Yamina, you're giving yourself through the flowers. If you're a Luxil, you're giving flowers. And there's a big difference. It's a cloud bottle butter. So these are the meters of Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes. If you notice, I pointed there like a segel. They go to the right, left, and center. And that's exactly what it is. Extreme right, extreme left, and harmonizing the middle. Under that, there's another segel. It's called Netzach on the right, Chayid on the left, and Yesoid in the middle. Once again, what does that mean? Netzach means to say a person which takes his expression, he totally expresses himself, but the purpose is not self-expression, but to shrink other people. Do you ever see people like that, specifically teachers? Okay, they go, I'm here, now listen. You know what I mean? They're expressing themselves in a way which diminishes the people around them, which is really, it's a stupid thing to do. But that's what happened. That's it. You're overwhelming. He expressed himself in a way which overwhelms people around him. That's netzach, to overwhelm. To linatzeach is to overwhelm. Netzach. The person who embodies that, interesting enough, is Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is, now this can be done for Kedusha too. I have such an important, sometimes you stood in front of the Rav or the Lubavitcher Rebbe, you felt small, okay? Not that he was bad, he was nice, but his presence shrunk you. Okay, when I looked at Rav Moshe Feinstein, that little man, which is 5'3", where he has a few hundred times of Shas and Shulchan Aruch under his belt, I felt like I was a pipsqueak, okay? And he was the nicest, if you knew him, he was the nicest guy on earth, rosy cheeks, sweet granddaddy type of a person. But what can you do? You felt, you know what I mean? This is the Metzias. You shrunk. He was unbelievable. That's the way he was. So his personality shrunk the world around him. You have people, that's called Netzach. That was Moshe Rabbeinu. He was awesome, okay? His presence, any expression of himself, shrunk the world around him. You can look carefully in the Chumash, you'll understand that. That's Netzach. It's an extreme reality. It can be taken to the bad also. We've seen people in a negative way, being Menatzeach, and therefore shrinking the world around them, and not in a positive way. And then there's Haid. Haid is the total opposite. Haid is the idea of giving space to shrinking yourself to give space to other people. A wise teacher will, in a class, allow expression of the students, if they're already capable of thinking. That's another stage, okay, to express themselves, because if he's constantly just going to tell them the information that he has in his mind, they will never develop. How are they going to develop unless he teaches them how to think by giving them the capability of thought and going into dialogue? By just doing a monologue, how is he going to teach them how to think? He's going to show how he thinks. Thank you very much. But how is he going to think? You have to allow him to make his mistakes. You have to allow him to resist and to beat. Therefore, this is the midah of Haid, which we know is Aaron HaKohen, which always gave space to people, even people that felt they were sinners and losers. He would teach them how to do tshuva. If a person felt his marriage is falling apart, he would help fix that. If a person thought that his fraternal relationships were not doing well, he made shalom ben ish leishta, ben adam lechavera, ben adam lemakom. He was a person that said there's always hope and you can always find, there's always place for you. So this is the midah of Haid. Haid also comes from the idea of Haidah. You're thanking. What are you thanking? When you say thank you, what are you doing? You are basically shrinking. You magnify that you're dependent on God, and therefore shrinking yourself to be, you're making yourself dependent. That's shrinking your ego. That's Haidah. So the idea, that's his Netzach, and Haid is get Moshe Aaron. Then there's also the segel in the middle. How do you merge all that? It's called Yesod. Yesod is the idea of capability of taking that total massive personality, whether you're Chesed personality, or Gvur personality, your Tiferes personality, your Netzach personality, your Haid personality, different aspects of the person. And each of us has this, and there's mixtures of what we do with them. It's once we have this capability of analyzing, we can really start looking carefully at why we do things and what's happening. And then there's Yesod. Yesod is, all these great ideas that you have, can they translate into a reality? Some people live totally in a cerebral world, but it doesn't even touch their, I can discuss these ideas from today till tomorrow. They can be great psychologists, but somehow they are neutered when it comes to expressing these great ideas into a practical reality. I hate to say it, stroke patients suffer from these things where all of a sudden all the great ideas they have and they would love to express themselves, they're very frustrated because they don't lack the tool of expressing that which they have inside, outside. It doesn't come out even in words, even in body movements. It's a terribly frustrating thing. One who would see the Lubavitcher Rebbe in that stage of life, Le'aleinu, at the end, where he had this terrible stroke, you could have seen his frustration. He couldn't express himself, so therefore when they would sing around and dance around him, you wouldn't know, was he agreeing or what is he actually crying, because he was lacking his midas hayesod that was injured. That part of his of his brain was injured, and therefore they lacked the midas hayesod. The person which is capable of translating this is we're now going to biblical care. And the final reality is, if you have the interpersonal relationship and you have the capability of translating, do you actually translate this? This is realization for Lamaisa. That's called Malchus. Malchus means now God had this all interpersonal reality, he had the capability of translating it, and he translated it. The world around me is Malchus. Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I've expressed myself as king and domain. These are the midos ha'elyonos. So when it comes to us, we have to understand the halachta b'dracha. We have to analyze these different midos ha'elyonos. So I said before, like what's going to be starting, is midos hanetzach. You'll have it tonight, And your question is going to be, to what extent is there loving kindness, for example, chesed, giving to other people endlessly in your midas hanetzach? These things which it's really, you look at it carefully, these are 49 days of serious psychological analysis. Serious psychological analysis, which we should be doing. And that's why if you see Hasidim, go to the Rebbe's, they do this whole thing, Spheres Omer, I don't know, it takes a long time for these people. Ich bin akal to Litzvak, you say the bracha, you say Ayoim, you say Arachman, and you go home. Okay? But they say the whole spiel before and after because it's true. These are tefillos coming from the Ari, that we should fix these midos. If you saw the lashon of the tefillah there, there's a Ribayla Shalayla at the end of Sphere Omer. Once again, I don't say it, but I want to read it to you. Okay, it's in the sheet that I sent you. Ribayla Shalayla, Master of the world. You commanded us through Moshe, your servant, the counting of the Omer. We'll discuss in a minute what that means. It means the Omer period. Omer is because of the Korban Omer, which we were makriv on the day after, the first day of Cholamayit, which afterwards became until the Korban of the Shtei Alechem, which is in Shuas. That's what's called Sfiras Omer. Omer is a measurement of barley. Okay, there's a Korban Minchas HaOmer. Now this is called Sfiras Omer because the sphere which started with the Korban Omer. Why did we do that? Kedei l'ta'areinu, this is a tefillah written in Chemdas Hayamim, which is basically the Maria Al-Ghazi, based on the Medrash Beis El, which is Talmidei HaRashash and the Ari. Kedei l'ta'areinu miklipaseinu, to purify us from externalities and mitumaseinu and for our religious pollution. כמו שכתבת בתורתך וספרתם לכם ממחרת השבת ביום אביאכם את עומר התנופה 7 שבשות תמינות תהיינה עד מחרת השבת השביעית תספרו 50 יום. The Mahachu writes that the Sphira, and also the Ramban writes, that the Sphira of Sfiras Omer is parallel to the Sphira of Anida and Azava. We have to have Shiva Nikiyim by Azava. We have to have 7 days of purity. Here we have to have 7 weeks of purity to walk away from the pollution of our personalities. That's what this is supposed to be. This is literally like Shiva Nikiyim, 7 Shivaot Nikiyot. I mean, this is a Ramban al Torah. I hate to say this. It's not some kind of Hasidic book. This is what this period of time is for. It drives me nuts. The people think, what is this Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim? What about every day? It's your private Yom Hadin of your personality. But this is what the Kadeshi Taru Nafshoy Samcha Yisrael Mizumatam. That the souls of your nation Israel should be purified from their pollution. That's what the weeks are for. That's what the counting is. This is count. What is the idea of counting? Counting is an idea of assessing and knowing. What happens if you don't know if today is this day of the Omer or the other day of the Omer? A suffix? Do we say, no, we don't, there's Avram writes, that's not Sphira. Sphira is that you count because you know. It means you have to know what happened, what's with this Midah this day. You have to know today is, let's say, was the 21st, it is still going to, UP definitely, the 21st day of the Omer. This means to say, Malchus, Shevet Tiferes, what did I do? Today, literally, it's a beautiful tefillah. Maybe we should say it even though it's not your nusa, because this will help you get into the mood of the period. But what do you mean the counting? Yes, the counting means the accounting with an A in front of the counting. The accounting of that day, counting the day and dealing with its identity and what has to be done in that day. Yutukan, which we rectified, Masha Praganti, B'Sphira, and then you write what is the Sphira, what is the attribute that you were working on and thinking about during the day. Yutukan, Masha Safarti, B'Masha Praganti, B'Sphira, V'Taher, V'Kadesh, and I will be purified and I will transcend. God will give me Siyata D'Shmaya through celestial holiness. But by the fact that I fixed my personality, or rather cared or attempted or was thinking about my personality, You took and Yushba Shefer Rav B'chol, there will be a multiple expression of God's grace at all levels of consciousness. The takenet nafsha yiseinu. This will fix our nefesh, which means to say our emotional persona, our basic core existence. Nefesh is the koyach hachayim. Nefesh is versus ruach. Nefesh is the koyach hachayim, the fact that you're a living matter. The takenet nafsha saying that our core life identity should be purified, rectified. Ruach yiseinu, which means nefesh, and ruach, which means to say that part of that aspect of my soul, which is expressed in my emotional and mobile, moving person. Nishma Seinu, that which is not actually expressed in the body, but hovers over the body, which is the core of that. There's nefesh, ruach, and neshama. We described at different times during this Yurim. Because sig v'bgam, there should not be any imperfection or any blemish. The tarenu, to purify us, the kadshenu, to bring us transcendency, b'gdushas elyoina, in your celestial transcendency. Amen. So this is a beautiful tefillah. This is a tefillah which tells you on a daily basis what you're supposed to be doing this time of introspection. So so this is the idea behind this. If you look carefully, so you have is 7 weeks, and every week you have 7 days. Each day is a different midday. It's basically your psychological profile is 49 attributes. 49 attributes. Now, as this is what is called in Chazal, Memtes Sharei Tuma and Memtes Sharei Kedusha. Was Memtes Shu'urim. I still remember when I first came to Israel in Elul Tavshin Chav Dalet, 64. And they told me there's a place called Mea Shu'urim. I think, wow, this is a cool place. It's got 100 gates. I looked around. There's 4 of them. Where's the 100 gates? I didn't chap that it meant to say it's a pasuk in Chumash. The Yitzchak was Zereh, was at Mea Shorim. There it meant to say measurements. I'm not going to say, what does it mean a shar? What does it mean Memtes Sharei Tuma? Where are these gates? Memtes Sharei Kedusha. Where I looked at them like I look at the Mea Shorim. Like, where's the gates? And the answer is because Rav Nachman explains this. Rav Nachman says, what's a gate? A gate is basically that reality which allows you to express your inner self externally and to internalize external phenomena. That's where you walk out of and where you walk into. That's what a gate is. You need a mezuzah at your gate. When you move to the outside or you bring from the outside into yourself, you have to look at God and make sure this is right. That's the idea of the mezuzah b'sharecha. Okay, it's your gate. The Shalah writes on the pasuk Shoftim v'shoitrim titan lecha b'chol sha'arecha. You should have shoftim, people which should assess with das, and shoitrim, and certain ways of governing b'chol sha'arecha, in all your gates, each one of your gates. Whether we're talking about the 5 senses, which are gates, or you're talking about your midos, which are all gates. Okay, you have to have das at each gate, and to make sure you do it correctly. Every time you interact, you have to first have das behind it in order to have to say, well, this is not the way to do it. That's your shot there. So we already see primarily that gates is a metaphor for the person's psychological profile. Memtes Sharei Tuma means to say that each aspect of their personality was decrepit. So when you talk about Golus Mitzrayim, you're talking about a community which became so intensely impure that every aspect of the psychological persona was decrepit. That's called Memtes Sharei Tuma. That all the shurim that they had were engulfed in impurity. The idea is that this time of the year is to take, that's the zuama, that's the impurities that we were drowning in it. And this is the idea of this time of the year to actually try to walk out of those memtes shari tuma, and nothing will help us if we won't do it on our own. And we won't do it on our own unless we're aware of the importance of the period and we start analyzing it very carefully. Just 1 minute. Okay, we have to analyzing it very carefully, and that's what I tried to do now. So now we understand what this is. In light of this, I'd like to start looking carefully at the at the just to show you what it means in the Sphere Simer list. If you have in the picture in this page in front of you, so you have here. You look carefully at every day. There's another. Let's look at the words on Hayom Yom Echad La'omer or Ba'omer. So you have here. It says under those words. It says right next to it. There's a yud, a big yud. Under that, there's the word Elokim, or the word Ana, and the word Chesed Sheba Chesed. What do these things mean? Well, let's start with the letter Yud. If you look carefully and you go down the list, if you would have a siddur, you would see what this is. You would see what this is. Look, you have, just take the 4 days that you have in front of you, Yom Echad, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, Yom Revi, you have Yud, Sin, Mem, Ches. You know what that is? That is in the Perik Tehillim, which is found that you said Kiddush Levana last night. So you had Lam Natseach at the end of it. The core, the biggest pasuk in that kapitel, in that Perik, is the middle pasuk, Yismachu v'yiranenu le'umim. The world around will be happy and will rejoice. Ki tishpot amim mishor. They realize that you judge the world straightforwardly, ulumim ba'aris tanchem, and you lead history. Selah. People will be happy because they realize that nothing is haphazard and you actually lead the world, and it's actually with justice. That's the core pasuk. If you look carefully there are 49 letters to that pasuk. You can count the 49 letters to that pasuk. Every day of the Sphira is a day of meditation on a certain aspect of that pasuk. Another thing which is so important to know, okay? And therefore, for example, on the first day of Sphira, you focus on the Yud of Yismachu. The second day of Sphira, you focus on the Sin, Shin, whatever it is, it's on the other side, of Yismachu. The third day on the Mem of Yismachu. The fourth day on the Ches of Yismachu. The fifth day on the Vav, or the Chayla, or the Shuruk, rather, of Yismachu, and then the next word, and so on and so forth. So once again, we see here a correlation. These are meditations found in the Ari. This seems to be very important because there are very few Sidurim have Kavanas of the Ari written down in the Siddur. There's 2 places where the Kavanas are found in almost all Sidurim, except for Rinat Yisrael. Okay, there's Sfirat Omer, and there's Ana B'Kayach. If you look at it carefully, in most Sidurim, after every sentence in Ana B'Kayach, there's a bunch of letters there. And we're going to try to explain them to you if you want to know. And in Sfir Simer, you got this list over here, all this little letters. It's interesting to see how Klal Yisrael kept this, the Balatanya, when he wrote his Siddur, so he deleted all the Kavanas Ari except for these 2 things. He saw this important because this is something you have to think about. That's why he left it there. Anybody wants to know. So that's why I'm teaching it here. Because the Balatanya felt this is avoided, which has to be done. At least learn about it. The Tanya writes in his 43rd chapter, says, how do you develop an idea, an emotion that you identify with? Learn about it. Talk about it. It should become part of your conversation. Slowly but surely, it'll inculcate, it'll become part of who you are. You talk about chesed Allah, and ultimately you start identifying with it, and you become a person of chesed. It says the way beficha u'bilvavcha la'asaysa. You know how you become a person? Beficha. Talk about it a lot. So this is what we have to do here. So I want you to understand that's the yud. Then it says Elokim. You saw under the first day of the Sphere Simer, it says Elokim. What's that? That is basically, if you look carefully, right after the Sphere up, there's a capital Tillim. Okay, is a parak of Tillim. We once learned it together. I just want to look what that is over there. Now, this is a minik kadmoin, for goodness sakes, the Bala Akeda, which lived 2 generations after the Rambam, writes that this is a minik kadmoin to say this during the Sphere Simer. So we're talking the times of Mamish, the early Rishonim, that they say it's an ancient custom by Jews that this parak of Tillim is said during the period of Sphere Simer. We now do it at the time of counting a Sphere Simer for the simple reason that's the only time when people wake up, remember what the period is. But it's nothing to do with the counting. It has to do with what the counting is about. This period of time, we must focus and learn that Perek in Tehillim. The Ari taught us that every day of Sfiras Omer is parallel to another letter of the total kapitel. If you look carefully, okay, you will see it's right. You think about there are 49 words in that Perek. And every day, not only do you focus on the core pasuk, which is 49 letters, but you focus every day on another plus part of a pasuk in that kapitel. That is all giving you clues of avoidance of Yom, how it will help you work in your introspection. Hopefully we'll get something across and maybe you'll understand a bit what's supposed to be done. This is a heavy period. So that's your Elohim. Afterwards you have Ana. What's Ana? Well, you know that after you have, going back to the Sfiras Omer Siddur, after the Lam Natseach, which most people say also at the end of Kiddush Levana, there's Ana B'Kayach. Ana B'Kayach is written by Nechunya ben Hakaneh. Okay, that's a Tana. Nechunya ben Hakaneh was also a big Kabbalist. He wrote a sefer called Sefer HaKaneh. Ramban quotes it extensively in his Pirush HaChumash, Medrash Rabbi Nechunya, or Sefer HaKaneh. Okay, he writes, this is Sefer, this is Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakaneh. Well, if you don't carefully look, Ana B'Kayach is a poem written by him. And if you have in front of you the sheet, you'll see after each, how many sentences are there in Ana B'Kayach? Well, look carefully. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 sentences in Ana B'Kayach. The last sentence of what does that mean? Well, I'll explain. Ana B'Kayach is a poem written by Nechunya ben Hakaneh. But basically, you look what the inner meditation is. This is what's found at the side in those Rashi Tevos. That's the name of God. That's the name of God right there. That's the name of God. That's a name of God which has a certain amount of letters. You want to start counting them? Enjoy. If I recall, it's 72 letters. Okay? Or maybe it's 46. I don't remember at the moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, this must be 46. Shem is 42. Then Shem Mem Beis. The Shem Mem Beis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is that what you're looking at is the Shem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We only know in our Siddur the big name of Yud K Vav K, but in the Mikdash, they would also use the name of Shem Baby. There's also a letter which is Ayin Vav. It's a Gemara in Sukkah. The Gemara describes that there's a name of God coming from all the letters of the three psukim in Kriyas Yamsuf, without going into it. There's different names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which are more mefayrosh than the Yud K Vav K. Yud K Vav K is a core name, but there's more expressions. Well, this is the shame of, well, I don't want to pronounce it, but that's the name of God. All those letters found in Ana B'Kayach. What he's doing here is making a prayer which embodies within it, explaining depth into what the midos are found in that name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why we say Baruch Shem Kavod B'chutz L'Void at the end of that. Why? Because since his name is only, you said, in the Mikdash, and in the Mikdash, when you said they heard the name of God, you didn't say Amen at a bracha. What did you say? Baruch Shem Kavod B'chutz L'Void. Because whenever you heard the Shem Hashem HaMefarish with a Yud Kei Vav Kei, or the Shem Ayin Vav, or the Shem Mem Beis, you wouldn't say Amen. You'd see Shem Hashem Ekra Havogaydel Elokeinu. You would say Baruch Shem Kavod B'chutz L'Void. And that's why after Ana B'Kayach we say Baruch Shem Kavod B'chutz L'Void. Now there's an interesting question you're obviously going to ask. So why is it that in Sfiras Omer we are even mentioning this? What does this have to do with the Mikdash? Why all of a sudden are we doing this? Well, what is the common denominator in the Siddur? When do we say this Ana B'Kayach? Well, we take in our Siddur, we say Ana B'Kayach, first of all, well, for those who wake up earlier enough, at the end of Karbanos in the morning, we say Ana B'Kayach. You say Ana B'Kayach, Kabbalah Shabbos. You say Ana B'Kayach. You say Ana B'Kayach in Sfiras Omer. Ana B'Kayach. Anything else? Well, anything else? Well, let's leave it at that at the moment. I'm not going to go further. The basic common denominator between all three, these are what we call Migdash experiences. The Karbanis are said because we don't have the basic Migdash now, so we have somewhat of an inner Migdash experience, the Shalma Parnas Fasenu. Kala Isaac Bateris Oila Keilu Hikriv Oila, Kala Isaac Bateris Shlamim Keilu Hikriv Shlamim. So we're Isaac Bateris Oila, that's what Keilu Hikriv Oila, that's what we do by saying the Karbanis. That's why it's very important, brought down the Shulchan Aruch, at least to say the Parshas HaTamid. That's brought in Shulchan Aruch. That's not an additive. The minimum is to say after brachas and birchas haTorah and birchas hashachar to say Parshas HaTamid, Tzaviv Deiso Marta Aleim. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. Because you want to be Mekayim Keneged Tamid Shel Shachar, which the tefillahs are Keneged Tamid Shel Shachar. So you should say at least the Parshas HaTamid, which is not long. It's a few psukim. Okay? So that's a Migdash experience. When we deal with a Migdash experience, we say on the Bekayach, describing a shame which is found in the Migdash, and therefore we answer via Boshing for Malchus. We talk about Shabbos. Well, this is a Ramban, when the Ramban explains in Parshas Emor, on the pasuk is Shabbos. No, this is in Parshas Bechukos Bahar, where it said, or in Kedosh Bahar, it says in two places, Shabsosai Tishmeru Umigdashi Tiro. So the Gemara understands Shabbos means Shabbos, and Migdash means the temple in Har Maria. So the Ramban Balderech HaEmes, but in Kabbalistic tradition, Migdashi Tiro does not mean the Migdash on Har Maria. It means the temple of time, which is Shabbos. What is the temple of time, which is Shabbos? And Migdashu Shabbos. This is written in Ramban. Why? Because just like there's a place where we can, I would say, stop the world and get off and connect to transcendence. There's a time where you can stop the world and get off and connect to transcendency. It's called Shabbos, especially these summer Shabbosim, which are so long. It's about Tashkis to waste that time when you can actually go into the Migdash of Zman. It's an unbelievable period of time. Ad Kedei Kach, the Gemara says, I'm going to quote a Gemara, and time is still heard. The Gemara says that when there's more time, for example, from Tu B'Av, there's more time because people were busy until Tu B'Av, chopping wood for the Atzei HaMaracha, for the logs, for the Mizbeach. But that's all until Tu B'Av, the 15th day of Av, because afterwards the sun isn't that strong, and therefore the trees aren't that dry, and we don't want to have that type of wood on the Mizbeach. We're afraid of worms, so therefore we don't chop wood anymore. So the Gemara, well, it means to say that now the nights are getting bigger, and you don't have to work anymore chopping wood, so you have more time to learn. The Gemara says from that point of time, whoever adds on his learning, he's doing well. Whoever he doesn't, he basically says it's a death sentence. Yosef, Mandi Yosef, whoever adds time of his learning, now wow, he's adding greatness to himself. And if he doesn't add to his learning, and the opposite is true, he is diminishing his existence. It's a Gemara in timeless, Daf Lamed. When Esther, it's also Gemara Bashida, Kuf Gimel. So basically, this is this is the idea of just a minute. Yes, Migdash Zman. There's a time now, especially the times in the summer. There's the time of Kedushas HaMikdash. But when we understand Shabbos as a Migdash experience, we once again say on the B'kayach, we're introducing ourselves into the Migdash Zman through the Chadaidi, or rather through Kabbalah Shabbos, through the 6 Kapitla Chantila, which the Ari instituted. That's Ikar Kabbalah Shabbos. The Chadaidi is a later poem written by a counterpart of the Ari, but that's not part of the Takana of the Ari. The Ari was to be Makabel Shabbos with the first 6, the 6 Prakim. The Chadaidi is a separate issue. Okay, we can deal with it some other time. I also discussed that when I was in America. Okay, it's also interesting. If you look carefully in the Chadaidi, there are 2 stanzas there which deal with Shabbos. All the rest deal with Yerushalayim and the Mikdash. Look at it carefully. Migdash melech ir melucha kumitzi mitoich hafecha ravlach sheves me'emek abach v'yach malaya chemla, etc. It's talking about walking out of destruction and galus. It's only shomer v'zachar in the beginning, v'diber echad. Afterwards, it's already something else. It's isnari mi ofar kumi livshi b'kay tifar techami. We're talking all the way from the churban. We're talking walking out of the churban abayis the churban ha'ir sheyushalayim. All of that is what's happening over there in that lechadaydi. It's only the first stanza of shomer v'zachar and the last one of bayi b'shalom ateres b'ayla. Gam b'sim chutzol. That's Shabbos. So the two ends are Shabbos. In the middle is all Yerushalayim in the Mikdash. Because Shabbos is Mikdash Hazman. One has to understand that's a davar pash. That's the meditation part on that lechadaydi. It's because of that we say Ana B'Kayach, the same thing. We decided we discussed the Mishem, this great name of God, and we once again say La Baruch Shem K'vay Malchut Tzilay. Sphere Saimer. Is this a Mikdash experience? The answer is yes, it is. It's a Mikdash experience because Midai Raisa, we're going to, except for one Shita and Rishonim. All overwhelmingly, Rabbi Yisrael and Rishonim believe that the counting of the Omer is predicated by the Korban HaOmer of Machas HaShabbos HaShvi, and then you count, and then you end it with the Shtei HaLechem, the Korban of Shavuos. We move from the Korban of the first harvest of barley to the first harvest of wheat. That's where we're moving. From barley to wheat. And we count our progression from barley to wheat. Just want you to understand that Zman Chazal and Zman HaMikra, barley was machal behema. Today it's health food. Like bran today is health food. Once upon a time it's called subid. Who ate bran? You ate white bread, right? Levy's white bread. Whoever heard of what, black pumpernickel? You were from the ghetto. Like whoever ate that stuff? You understand? But that time it was going from machal behema till machal adam. From sa'irim to chitim. And that's a nice way of saying, good, you walked out of Egypt, you have to fix your midos. You fix your midos for 49 days. Now you can become a mensch. Now you can have machal adam, which is chita. That's the idea of the shtei HaLechem, which is bought from chita, and the korban omer is bought from sa'ira. So the din is, it's a progression from korban A to korban B, but that's only if you have bought the korban. No one bought a minchas omer yet. There's no migdash, so there's no sphere deraisa. The sphere is only midrabana. Why do we do it midrabana? Because if you look at right every day after the sphere, you said Arachman, hu yazulanu avodas beis hamikdashim komabim erbi amenu amen sela. What are you saying? I am counting the sphere because there is no migdash, but I want to remember the migdash. You're counting the Omer every day to remember the fact that there is no migdash and you want it. You want to know which mitzvah you're being mekayim tonight when you count Sphere Omer. You're not being mekayim the mitzvah of Sphere Omer. You're mekayim the mitzvah of Drishat Sion. You're mekayim the mitzvah of Zecher LaMigdash. That's why we say Rachamonu Yazilonu Avodas Beis Hamikdash Limkoma. There is no Sphere Omer Bisman Hazeh Deraisa. The only thing which is a biblical value is covered in Meira of Mikdash, which is expressed in different Kabbalah through the Droshet HaMidrash, Mikdash. That's a Gemara and a Mishnah in Sukkah, where it says, Tzion, Dorish, Einla, Mikan, the boy Drisha, we are, the Navi tells us part of Kavod, the Meira of Mikdash, is to be Dorish Tzion, to search it, to look for it, to miss it. So this is another aspect of this period of time. We are basically 49 days of missing the Mikdash. And expressing that passion that I missed the Mikdash by counting Omer, reminding you of what was, which isn't existent now. So next tonight, when you count Sphere Omer, think the Shem Yichud Kud Shabrichu, I'm becoming a mitzvah, a divrei Kabbalah of Drishat Sion. That's the mitzvah you're being mekayim. And a very important aspect, once again, people aren't aware of. That's the mitzvah you're being mekayim. How do I express Drishat Sion? By counting the Omer. I say this because people say certainly Shem Yichud, and they say they B'kayim Mitzvah Shesphere Omer, and then they bring a pasuk in Chumash. This is an illegal entity because you're not allowed to send something which is not a deraisa. It's a deraisa. You're not fulfilling the pasuk. It was Fatun Lachem Mimachza Shabbos. It's not true. Because there it says, Miyom Haviachem Et Omer Atnufai, the day that you bought the korban. Well, you guys didn't bring the korban. You're in the midst of Zeicher Lemigdash, of Tzion Boy Drisha, and that's why we say, Arachman Hu Yalzer Lanu. It is obvious that the Arachman is an early reality. Based on that Shita La'alacha, the sphere is Durabanan, it's only Zeicher Lemigdash, and whoever wrote the Shem Yichud was of the halachic opinion, that's Deraisa. But for us to say that's Deraisa is a major halachic problem. I do suggest not saying that or amending it in whatever way you choose. So this is the idea of, therefore, since this is a Migdash experience, we say on the B'kayach too. So first we learned today is two things. We learned the idea that this is a period of introspection of our interpersonal personality. We've also learned, and I'm going to give it more flesh next time around, that this is a period of missing the Migdash. And we express that passion of missing the Migdash by being Sefer Sphere Simon, that the Arachman Yazalanu Avodas Beis HaMikdash Kama Kumher B'Yameinu Amen Selah. Have a great night or afternoon or morning, wherever you are. Call 2, 5. I get bench. Ben, see you.